This was big news to the hundreds of thousands of enslaved men, women, and children who had continued to toil as human chattel in the Lone Star State throughout the war after the Emancipation Proclamation, which went into effect on January 1st, 1863, and even months after the official ending of the Civil War in April of 1865. Plantation owners had managed to continue business as usual in Texas because throughout the war there had been very little Union presence in the state. The Emancipation Proclamation held no water in Confederate states that did not recognize the authority of the United States government. It could only be enforced with the presence of Union troops. For those of the enslaved who did not join the thousands of runaways, conditions remained largely unchanged, and in some cases worsened due to the pressures of the war. Some owners had to sell their slaves to pay for rising debts, while others uprooted families and moved to more remote places like Texas, where they felt more secure maintaining slave labor. There were some cases where the enslaved were left in charge of plantations while the owner joined the war effort, and sometimes the enslaved were taken to the front lines where they were put to work in support of the Confederacy. This quote, taken from an interview with a formerly enslaved woman in Arkansas, illustrates the attitude of some plantation owners towards the idea of Union soldiers coming in to enforce emancipation. Here she paraphrases the words and demeanor of her former owner. Them Yankees ain't going to get this far, but if and they do, you all ain't going to get free by them because I'm going to free you before that. When they get here, they're going to find you already free because I'm going to line you up on the bank of Boisdart Creek and free you with my shotgun. Anybody miss just one lick with the hoe or one step in the line or one clap of that bell or one toot of the horn, and he going to be free and talking to the devil long before he ever see a pair of blue breeches. It is perhaps difficult for us to imagine the range of emotions felt by enslaved men and women upon learning they were now free. This quote from Felix Haywood, a man enslaved in Texas, gives one perspective. Soldiers all of a sudden was everywhere, coming in bunches, crossing and walking and riding. Everybody was singing. We was all walking on golden clouds. Hallelujah. Everybody went wild. And then this one from Charlotte Brown of Virginia. The news come on a Thursday, and all the slaves been shouting and carrying on till everybody was quiet and peaceful. All at once, Sister Carrie, who was near about 100, started into talking. Tain't no more selling today. Tain't no more hiring today. Tain't no more pulling off shirts today. It's stomp down freedom today. Stomp it down. These excerpts from the WPA slave narratives conducted in the 1930s offer us a small peek into what the formerly enslaved were thinking and feeling in those moments after the arrival of General Gordon Granger and his 2,000 Union troops. And so, the first Juneteenth was held 1 year after that big announcement on June 19, 1866. Oral tradition maintains that a whole hog was barbecued, and the color red became a prominent symbol of the sacrifices made for freedom throughout slavery and its aftermath and during the Civil War. As the years went on, freedmen and women of Texas held Juneteenth celebrations despite the obstacles presented by a resistant white power structure that implemented a series of black codes to limit the newly found freedoms of African Americans almost as soon as the Civil War ended.
A little bit of oral history to kick off today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to Stir Crazy. This is episode 57. We are celebrating Juneteenth on this 19th day of June 2020. I'm your host, Kim Brown. What we just heard was an excerpt from oral historian Kelly E. Navins from the National Museum of African American History and Culture, giving us a little bit of a snippet about what Juneteenth was like when the slaves, who were the last ones to be made aware of it in Galveston, Texas, got the news, and how they were even still threatened pretty much up until the day before they heard that news by their white slave owners, and of course the 100 years of Jim Crow that followed after emancipation, and the fact that we are still very much in the struggle for freedom in the year 2020. We've got a full slate for you today, folks. Listen, we know it's Friday. We know the weather is good in a lot of places around the country. People are out participating in actions for Juneteenth, also participating in celebrations. This is a day to celebrate. And I think that our conversation today will be very robust and informative, and give everyone a good perspective of how Black Americans and hopefully the diaspora at large. I mean, we're going to celebrate for everybody's liberation and freedom on today. So coming up on the program, like I said, we're going to talk about some protests, some actions, especially the big one happening in Oakland, California, where the Port of Oakland has been shut down by a Juneteenth protest / march out there. Also, if we want to look ahead slightly to the 4th of July, gang, NYPD, they are threatening, at least rumored to be threatening, a blue flu on the 4th of July. So if you were in New York for the independence of the United States weekend, you may be a little bit freer than you thought. And we're also going to talk about how the coronavirus, which we know has disproportionately killed Black people and brown people across this country, well, it has also exacerbated the racial wealth gap. The sins of America are being laid bare more and more by the day. But today I want to bring in our panel. We have two new guests to Stir Crazy. I'm very excited to welcome them today. We're joined with Branden Snyder. Branden is joining us today from Michigan. He's with the group Detroit Action. And Deborah Harris is joining us today from Chicago, Action Now Chicago. I'd like to welcome you both to Stir Crazy here on The Real News. Thank y'all so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate being here. Detroit welcome is what up, though. So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to share the time.
What up, though, Detroit 313? We love y'all. Man, listen, just a side note, one of my favorite hashtags to follow on Instagram is Detroit Natural Hairstylist. Oh my gosh, the girls.
The hair capital of the world. Yeah.
That is correct, man. I need some of them, ship them on out here. We need some help. Gang, before we get started, I wanted to take a quick look at a protest that was happening earlier today in Washington, D.C. under the banner, Defend Black Women. Let's take a look.
Women's lives are under attack. What do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
When black lives are under attack, what do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
What do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
What do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
Say, what do we do?
Stand up, fight back!
When trans lives are under attack, say, what do we do?
Stand up,
Stand up, fight back. That's right. And, because the protests are not as violently sexy as they were a couple of weeks ago, what I mean by that is there's not fires being set by outside agents or whomever. It seems as though, at least from the national news perspective, the coverage of the protests have died down, but the protests themselves have not died down at all. Deborah, can you talk to us about what's been going on in Chicago in the past few weeks?
Pretty much the same, violently sexy. People get their rocks off any kind of way, especially the media. But, and those things were caused by outside instigators. But Chicago is very much so in these streets, girl. And our mayor ain't happy, but oh well. We don't get to shut it down, like for real, manifesting it. Shutting down every major street there is. And so even the youth are out there in even stronger numbers. I mean, like there's a protest at least for a day. And someone asked me, like, do you think this will slow down? I was like, nope. This is where we are. And ain't nobody going back in the house until we get what we deserve. That's pretty much this where we at. So people better get comfortable, because ain't nobody going back home until we set this world straight, till we set this nation straight. So Chicago is still out there, very much so heavy, super heavy.
I wanted to ask you, Deborah, about, you mentioned your Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and here on Stir Crazy, we've been shining the light on a lot of these, neoliberal, democratically elected Black politicians in a lot of these big cities. which, for example, in Washington, D.C., the mayor, Muriel Bowser, created Black Lives Matter Plaza. At the same time, she increased the budget for Metropolitan Police Department by almost $20 million. So we know Mayor Lightfoot is receiving a lot of criticism right now about how she has handled the protests, but also how she is capitulating to Chicago police out there. Can you talk to us about your mayor?
Well, as the saying goes, let's just start there. All skin folk ain't kinfolk. Let's just because you Black, that don't mean that you got Black interests at heart. There are a lot of Black people that are more concerned with being close to white supremacy and the power that offers than actually liberating their own people once they get into office. So let's just say that. And the same goes for Mayor Lightfoot. I mean, just what she's allowed to happen in the Black community and Latinx community. In regards to even COVID, like not really caring what happens, closing down hospitals. And then even during this time of these uprisings and, our generation's civil rights movement and revolution, she is not responding. Her words and her actions show that she doesn't care, even as the entire nation is calling for, police departments to be removed from school. She's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Like straight out of her mouth, that's not going to happen. And it's just like she is not hearing nor cares or has any agenda that promotes thriving and real safety for our children, for our communities. And so, we honor, I've been saying a few months ago, I was like, who we running in 2023? Because if we don't have someone, in government, in these executive positions that have a serious Black agenda that's positive, not a Black agenda that will continue to silence us, erase us, and remove us from Chicago and Cook County, then we have a problem. So that's pretty much the short and skinny of what's happening here.
Branden, I'm going to knock it over to you. Can you bring us up to speed on what's been happening in Detroit? We can start with what's happening in Detroit today for Juneteenth, but just overall, what has Detroit been like in the past, over the past several weeks as this grand societal shift is taking place?
Yeah, and I would say, I think true to the conversation about Lori Lightfoot, both with our mayor Mike Duggan, but even our governor Gretchen Whitmer, I feel in this moment that a lot of the elected officials are more interested in being memes or getting clicks than actually passing policy that will keep Black bodies safe and keep people in their homes. That's been the biggest thing. So you got our governor in Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, white woman, nice white woman, but also, is in wearing the Cartier buffalo, buffaloes, which, the Buffies that people call it, which are, expensive, dope boy glasses at a COVID rally, as a sort of niche thing versus, and and these, or you look at in Detroit, the painting of Power to the People on a street. And these things are platitudes. They don't actually make up for, the need for real policy, the need for, not just reform, but the need for abolition, the need for a reimagining of what safety looks like. And so for us here in the city, we were for many months and for many weeks, in the early days of the pandemic, we were right up there with New York when we looked at COVID cases and COVID infections. When we look at COVID infections, and deaths here in the city of Detroit, you're looking at 75% of the folks who have been infected and died are Black folks. And then when you look at this uprising and rebellion that's happening, you hear more the narrative that these folks are out of town instigators, and not the fact of why people are out there. And for us, I think that our entire work has been really interested and invested in how can we talk about what could safety look like if we stop spending $300 million on policing, if we spent even just a fraction of that on public health, if we spent a fraction of that on housing, if we spent a fraction of that on counselors for schools and not cops. And then B, how do we actually reimagine, and fight against the white supremacy that causes over policing, or that's reinforced by over policing, that's reinforced by, these systems that ultimately end up hurting, Black and brown families. So a couple weeks ago, not even a couple weeks ago, a couple days ago, time is an illusion. A couple days ago, we did an action right on 8 Mile Road. And 8 Mile, if you've watched, the Eminem, movie, is the border between the city and the suburbs. It's also the starkest racial divide in the country. So you got folks who will, so you got folks who are Black and who live on the other side of 8 Mile and Warren, but are also over policed by Warren's PD. So we did an action where we shut down that intersection. Detroit, Oakland County, which is one of the wealthiest counties in the state, one of the wealthiest counties in the country, and Macomb County, which is the Obama-Trump swing district. And so we shut that down, and we talked about the history of policing in these communities. And so, just the final thing is that like we have been trying to make sure that like at Detroit Action in the city of Detroit, whether it's our Juneteenth rallies, whether it's the protests that have been happening weekly or daily, we're trying to recenter and reimagine, like, what does it look like to have, to think about safety in a different way. Again, the Einstein quote around, if you're doing the same thing over and over again, that's insanity, but we're spending more and more money every single day, every single year on policing. Our police budgets and our prison budgets have swelled since 1980. But like, this is what people's, like the Lori Lightfoots, like the Mike Duggins, like a lot of these folks who are running for office to Joe Biden, this is their solution to keeping us safe, is let's just throw more money at the problem instead of let's actually, getting to the root cause of it. So all of the protests, really centered around this idea of, how can we reimagine safety and how can we build something better?
When we talk about reimagining safety, a lot of politicians, especially on the Democratic side, we can't even count the Republicans because they are centuries really behind in where a lot of progressive thinking is headed towards reimagining a new society, Branden, exactly as you said, and what we prioritize in terms of our spending. I wanted to present something to y'all because I came across this article from the Jackson Free Press, Jackson, Mississippi. And in the piece, it talks about how the Jackson City Council last week or earlier in June 9th, what they have done is they have ruled or unanimously declared classism as a public health crisis, saying that it is the city council that is recommitting itself to improving the quality of life and health of the underclass. I wanted to get y'all's take on this because the council person who proposed this, his name is DeKeither Stamps, said that the city faces what Jackson, Mississippi faces is deeper than racism with regards to the health and other sectors of its residents. And he goes on to say, quote, several cities around the country are approaching the federal government and the Centers for Disease Control to look at issues inside of their communities. Delaware just received a partnership with the CDC on racism and public health. In the city of Jackson, we have a situation where people don't have appropriate services, and it's deeper than racism. I thought this was really interesting coming from a majority Black legislative body to prioritize classism over racism in this way. Deborah, let me get your thoughts about this, because I think it's an interesting point to raise, though I'm not really sure what it will translate to from a policy perspective.
As I was listening to that and reading the words, it's like, I don't know if it's easier to go after the effect rather than the cause, because that's what I read. Like, classism exists because of racism, because of racial capitalism, because of white supremacy. So it's like, is it easier for people to go after like what has come out of the thing instead of getting down to the root of the thing, because America still don't want to admit that they effed up and are trifling and horrible, and which is why we have all these issues, and they're still not comfortable with tearing down those systems that begot these issues, that made these issues possible, like classism, like racial capitalism.
Yeah.
And so it's
I also
like
think,
at
though, too,
this point, yeah. Go ahead.
no, I mean, 100%. Sorry to cut you off. I think like that's also like the issue around like white liberals is like they're cool with like talking about like class and cool with talking about like the impacts of versus like actually talking about race. So like true to your point, it's also like we the system of slavery and the system of racism doesn't exist because people are just mean people. It exists because it's profitable. So like, like if we ain't, like if white terror, wasn't enacted because they just, like shooting up Negroes, it was because they wanted to like instill and keep, and keep folks in line so the money can keep coming in. So like without folks, really, drilling down on like racism and really drilling down and connecting that to classism, you're really doing a disservice. You ain't really even talking about the actual issue that matters in the first place.
Yep. And that's something and now that we have circled back with like this generation civil rights movement, you better just say the thing and you better just be about the thing. Ain't no time to be whitewashing nothing. Ain't no time for nobody comfortability. Time out for that, because we ain't been comfortable since we've been here. Indigenous people ain't been comfortable since they came here. You know what I'm saying? So it's like time out for trying to create comfortable language to avoid the truth. Time out for that. And that's what I'm saying. Like, when I say like, we have to, in order to do that, especially for Black people, we have to realize when that rising up of white supremacy is coming from our minds and out of our mouths and causing more trouble. Because we also have to deconstruct white supremacy within us that tells us, oh, you can't say that thing, little Negro. You stepped over the line. We have to be willing to deal with what's in us that makes us stop from telling the truth and moving on the truth and acting on the truth in order to see true liberation. Like, we can't be scared of that no more. Like, it's time out for that. Call the thing a thing.
And on top of that,
the other thing.
Go ahead, Branden.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to add one more piece to that. Is that the other thing that is, clear about a lot of these, declarations of a public health crisis is that they're just easier to do. Like, let's just keep it real. Like, people aren't throwing any money towards like solving like the public health crisis of racism. People aren't, and Jackson probably ain't throwing no money towards solving a public health crisis of capitalism. It's easier to, it's just in the same sort of tokenized expression of, look what we gave you. That that happened in D.C. with Mayor Bowser, or you see it.
Bowser.
Yeah. So I think for a lot of folks, it's about like, what can we do to like just show that we listening? Can we throw up a Black Lives Matter hashtag and keep it moving versus like actually solving the problem?
And I think it's important for Black people to deconstruct for ourselves and also deconstruct to our white brothers and sisters. Like, just because if you are able to attend college and get a degree, that does not free you from experiencing racism. Quite the contrary, you might experience it more working in the corporate world and still be subjected to state violence and harassment and possible murder. Like, being a homeowner and being a college graduate and being a Black professional does not mean that you've made it to the mountaintop. And y'all have seen the tweets of, wonderfully ambitious young Black folks, whether or not they're about to be lawyers or doctors, but declaring that we are our ancestors' wildest dream, because they have ascended to this level of status, but they still got to deal with racist shit too.
Yep, that's real. And like, I don't like Kanye right now for a while because he's interesting. But one thing, I stand by, he said it. He was like, at the end of the day, you still in the coop, boo. Yeah. And it's because our country hasn't dealt with what it needs to deal with.
The wildest thing about all of this is that, like, this just reminds me of like that interview that Lecrae did with that white pastor, and they were talking about like white blessings, versus white supremacy. And that's just, that's just making white folks comfortable. Like, oh, I've been blessed. Nah, bro, you haven't had barriers erected in front of you to prevent you from attaining things. You've had, whiteness in America removes many barriers. So it's not about you having a degree of wealth. It's about, like, are there things that actually are put up in place to keep you out? And that's what I think, like, folks, misunderstand when we talk about, like, dismantling white supremacy, is like dismantling the system that puts out those barriers. Like, how do we think about, how do we think about making sure that the folks who are at the back of the line, aren't missing out just because that's where they are? How do we make sure that there is no line and there is no, and that hierarchy doesn't exist? So that's the thing that I think just gets missed in a lot of these conversations overall.
That's real. That's real.
Gang, I wanted to shift gears, if I could, to the COVID-19 crisis, which we're still very much in the middle of a pandemic. I know certain states have just was like, how about we just say the pandemic's over and just send everybody back outside? But no, the pandemic is still very much here. I believe the number is now 23 states which have seen dramatic rises in COVID-19 infections. And we know that relative to our percentage of the population here in the United States, Black and brown people are dying from this disease at much, much higher rates. And it's terrifying. I mean, it's extremely scary. I know it has hit Michigan hard, and I know it's hit Chicago hard as well. And beyond the actual health crisis that we're facing, the economic crisis is being exacerbated as well. And according to a new study a new report from the Institute for Policy Studies, they found that billionaires have come out like fat cats throughout this pandemic. Ever since the whole thing has kicked off from beginning of March to June, the combined wealth of all US billionaires has increased by more than 630 billion, okay? But the total number that they are now worth is $3.58 trillion. According to the the Institute for Policy Studies, they say that amount of money is more than the entire wealth of America's 59 million Latinx population combined, and equal to 3/4 of all Black wealth. Folks, I know you guys can talk about how COVID has impacted the job situation in your respective cities, and how that has really, it's hurting people. It's hammering people. We haven't seen this type of, food shortages for Americans really in a long time. And I know that poverty has been an ongoing issue in a lot of our urban and rural places. But how has COVID exacerbated all these pre-existing things that have been happening in your city of Chicago, Deborah?
I mean, it's everything you mentioned. It's like, I feel like us facing COVID-19 it feels like we're on our last leg here for the Black community on the South and West Side, and in Southland, which nobody really talks about in Cook County, which is like devastated. And it's like, when you already have government, state, local, federal, that does not invest in Black communities, and something like this happens, like, it's just like, I feel like those that are in power are just like, yes, finally a way to erase them from the map. Because the devastation is just like quadruple. We already had food deserts, and the food most communities have, like, I live on the West Side. Our food, for the most part, unless you cross over to the suburb, is at a liquor store. You know what I'm saying? Or a rundown grocery store that doesn't really have great produce or something like that. So it's like, we already have food deserts. We already don't have proper healthcare institutions. Like, they're constantly closing down hospitals here, not providing the correct resources. Like, there is no reason why there should be national food drives and PPE drives happening. You know what I'm saying? Like, thank God for Masks for America, for helping Chicago get masks, but like, there's no reason for this. And when you talk about how much money and the trillions of dollars that people have made off of our suffering, like it sickens me. Like it's like, I don't understand how this type of evil just wakes up and keeps breathing in the morning. Like, I really don't. And it's just like, how do we come back from this? And it's like, what are we going to do? And so, like, even in Illinois, when we see what's happening with COVID, when we know what's been happening before COVID, and we are having discussions around passing a progressive tax because these billionaires and millionaires and trillionaires need to pay their fair share into our economy, people are like, oh, no, we don't want to do that. That's a scheme. Da, da, da. I'm like, people really don't care about Black communities, about brown communities, about our indigenous populations that are suffering. People really don't care. And it's just like, we have to figure out a way to slingshot ourselves in front of this and fight like hell, because I just feel like we own our last leg.
Branden,
folks are really bought into billionaires. Yeah. I was going to say, folks are really bought into this like idea of billionaires are like, gods, and that these folks just work hard. And that's not the case. They've made so much money here in the state since COVID. Like Dan Gilbert, who's the richest man in the state, owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, owner of Quicken Loans, has made like $971 million since the shelter-in-place orders have, existed. The Meyer family, made money off of COVID, and like at the same time, you talk about the racial capital and the wealth gap. There's some estimates that there's going to be, Detroit already experienced, rates of like 2/3 of poverty of the population. And there's some estimates now that, coming out of COVID-19, there's going to be 80% of people who are going to be unemployed, when it's all said and done. There's going to be people whose jobs aren't going to come back. And, our unemployment benefits and nationally run out July 31st. That extra $600 that people are getting. And so what's missing is, and what's like, what's not being talked about is, that we were never a country in the first place that really invested in it and its poor. We were never a country that really invested in communities that are hurting working class Black and brown folks. We're a country that takes out of the mouth of poor folks and gives it to rich people. And so, when we think about this moment, we have to be thinking about like, what does it look like to have a good, robust government that actually like works for the people and not just works for like rich elected, rich folks. Because right now, it's people living off, people got $1,200 on a stimulus, and that's what the last 3 months. It's people still haven't even got those stimulus checks. So, meanwhile, you juxtapose to Canada or you juxtapose to Germany, and, they're not saying that those are places much better for Black folks at all. But, those people were getting $2,000 per month, in this time. So, like, we really have to, like, reorient how we think about, like, and how our government has to respond to folks and how it has to work for the people. And it has to especially work for Black folks. Because that's, at this moment, we're going to be the ones that are going to be that are going to be hurt by all of this. We see it with the deaths that have happened in COVID.
And I feel you, Branden. Like earlier when we were talking about reimagining our communities and what safety is, what you just said is what safety is. That's what safety looks like. Having everything that we need to just live and breathe. They ain't got nothing to do with police, and like safety is having the respect given to us that we deserve, having our human dignity uplifted and respected, and that being manifested in our housing, in our schools, and our resources in every level of life. Like that's safety. That makes me feel safe.
And Branden, I also wanted to ask you, because of the widespread water shutoffs that were happening in Detroit in general, but definitely around the onset of COVID when it came and hit Michigan very hard. And then I was thinking about the people in Flint. If washing your hands is part of protecting yourself from this disease, well, what do you do when the water in your house is either off or it's poisonous? As dangerous to you as probably this virus. How did the government respond first and foremostly, and how have people been dealing with the issue of water and lack thereof in your community?
Yeah. So the key thing to remember about the water shutoffs, and this resonates a lot with Chicago because I know that y'all are thinking about water affordability as well, is that there have been people who have been without water since 2014. There have been people without water in both Flint and in Detroit that have been without water since 2014. These water shutoffs aren't just a thing that happened during COVID. There are folks who have been without water, who have been trying to make it day by day, hustling and getting it from their neighbors, getting water drop-offs because their bills are astronomical, and they're being gouged. And you're right. Like if you're telling people as the CDC that you need to wash your hands for 20 seconds, how can you do that when if you don't have water in your home, running water in your home, or B, the lack of running water has caused your pipes to freeze over and burst, and now you can't have running water in your home. And so, I think that the one of the positive things that happened from the organizing, both in Detroit and in Flint, coming out of COVID, was the moratorium on water shutoffs, and the push to restore water for people who've had their homes, who lacked water in this moment. But there were some policy loopholes. A lot of the issues became, well, you had to have your water cut off during this specific time to have your water shut back on. Again, there have been people without water since 2014. Or the city of Detroit just moved too slowly to even restore water for people who qualify for that. So there are people to this day, as of Juneteenth in 2020, who have been without water, this entire pandemic. And so we wonder why, the infection transmissions continue to spread. We wonder why people are, fed up with the system as usual. And I think that that's like a thing that, we have to imagine is that, you think about, the water shutoffs, and you think about the fact that people can't pay their bill when we're surrounded by lakes in the state of Michigan. We're surrounded by one of the best water infrastructures in the country in the Detroit Water Department. Yet people can't pay their bills, and yet corporations like Little Caesars or like DTE Energy or Quicken or whomever in the city, can let their water run for years and not pay the bill and won't get it shut off. And that actually was one of the investigations that came out in 2014, was that there were big corporations that weren't paying their bill at all, or the city was slow to collect, and they never had their water shut off. So I think it's like, for us, it all goes back to like equity, and it goes, it's like connecting back to what the root of like this Juneteenth moment is like, how do we engage in joyous rebellion? Smiling on our face because, this shit is hitting the fan and the shit is happening, but how do we rebel and create something different that's forward thinking? And, our friends in the city, whether it's the Detroit Water Warriors, Hydrate Detroit, or We the People Detroit, who have been doing these water drop-offs, collecting water from vast sources and dropping off to families in need, embody that, joyous rebellion, because, we protect us, we keep us safe. And that's what it comes down to when you think about, you think about all the ways that we've had to do it out the system to make sure that people are safe in their communities with the government's slow response or no response.
Deborah, did you want to weigh in on that?
No, ma'am. He said all the things. It is what it is. And it's all facts. So there you go.
Well, one part about Black liberation that is raised a lot on social media in those conversations. I can't really say how much these conversations are taking part in the Black community at large. But it's the issue of patriarchy and how, we have these extremely tragic deaths and murders of Black men, and their names get lifted up, and everybody knows who they are. And granted, that's still only a fraction of the men and women and children who are killed annually by state violence in this country. But it takes a lot for Black women's names and Black trans women's names to get lifted up in the same way. And it seems as though what happened to Breonna Taylor is hopefully shifting that, I hope. And there has been slight progress, if you want to call it that, regarding her murder, which I believe Breonna was killed several weeks ago now. But one of the officers who was involved in executing that no-knock warrant on her apartment has now been fired from the Louisville Police Department. His name is Brett Hankison, and Hankinson is accused of firing his weapon, as they said it, quote unquote, blindly, about 10 times into Breonna's apartment. We know that she was shot and killed by 8 bullets. The only person to be arrested in this incident was her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, who was initially charged with attempted murder on police. Those charges were thankfully dropped, but all the officers remained free at this time. I wanted to ask you both, why, even in the struggle for Black liberation, I can't even say Black equality, I don't know what that is and even what that looks like, but in the struggle for our freedom that has been occurring since and before emancipation and Juneteenth, why are Black women delegated or regulated to like being the help even in our own communities? And I know both of you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. So Deborah, I'm going to start with you. So why is it so hard to get thousands out to call for justice for the murder of a Black woman, but when a Black man is murdered and his name and case and circumstances are, seized by the public and widely disseminated, it's not that hard to get a lot of people to rally for them. But when it comes to us and for our trans sisters and brothers, it's a whole different story.
I and I'm starting to feel nauseated. I wish that at this point we wouldn't even have to ask that question. But the truth remains that the Black woman is the most disrespected person in America. And that definitely comes from the tutelage of slavery and how we were categorized as less than. But I think for me, when I think about why Black women aren't seen as much, aren't protected as much, I don't know how to really articulate this, but I feel like there is a fear of the Black woman that started with white supremacy, that started with slavery. We are the life givers. We are the fighters. We are the ones that will be there to the end. We are the ones that have started the majority of these movements, whether we had an army behind us or not. And I feel like it's been taught to silence the Black woman at any cost. Because if she is given free reign, if she is set free, then she will free this nation. And it is something that has been placed into even our psyches somehow through us being dragged here, enslaved here, killed here, raped here. And that is still breeded. And I believe it's because of fear of our voice, of our power. And that there are higher entities that have taught us to keep us silent, to keep us unseen, to get rid of us as quickly as possible. And so when we think about Breonna Taylor and Sandra Bland and the countless other Black women, trans Black women that go missing, that are being hung, that are being killed, it's definitely a greater attack on us. Because I believe we are the key to freeing our people.
Branden, before I let you jump in, I'm sorry, baby, go ahead. Please finish, Deborah.
I'm good.
No, what I wanted to ask, but before I let Branden jump in, is there a Black or a Black trans woman's name from your city who has been killed either by police violence or in other means, whose name you would like to lift up on today to make sure that people know it?
I honestly can't even think of a name right now. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to any of my sisters that have passed away. But I lift up my sisters that have their lives have been stolen here in Chicago, across this nation. They are my sisters too. They are my blood too. And the thing is, it's like whether you're a Black woman, Black trans, a Black man, we have to see each other and fight for each other and stand with each other and not ignore each other, because we're already being erased from everybody else. We already have so much at our backs. We already have a system that wants to be rid of us. And we do have to stand up more for our brothers and sisters. And so I wish a name came to my head, but one does not come to my head right now.
I was thinking of Rekia Boyd. I think she was from Chicago.
Yes, Rekia is from Chicago. I didn't believe she was trans though. Black trans.
No, she wasn't. She wasn't trans.
Yeah, but Rekia Boyd, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Rekia Boyd, yes. And people, we still talk about Rekia Boyd. We had they still rally about her. Her name still is put on banners. She was mentioned last year at a rally we held because the police still haven't been held accountable for her murder, and her family is still suffering, so it's like people aren't going to let those names and those women, our sisters, slip away. But for some reason, they keep being pushed into the background. But thank God there are activists and family members and people who understand that Black women must be seen and not silenced. Even in our death, they have to be acknowledged. There are people that still fight hard and go to the mat for our Black women that are stolen from us.
Branden, I wanted to get your take about the centering of straight Black male lives who are killed by police, but the othering, so to speak, or the devaluing of Black women, Black gay and Black trans people who have also been murdered by police.
Yeah, and I don't have much more to add than Deborah lifted up. I think the 2 points I would make is this. One, that when you look at the movements to lift up the lives of Black men who've been killed by police terror, is usually Black women at the center who are doing that work. And so, but it's never a reciprocal movement where Black men are out lifting up the name and lifting up the murders of Black women, and we have to do better if we actually want to have this movement of Black lives mattering, really be authentic and true. And I don't think that it isn't, but I think that that's the call amongst Black men, is that we have to be better, and we have to actually love, honor, and fight for our for our sisters, for trans sisters, et cetera, because without it, then we're not, we're really fighting with one hand behind our back. So I think that's one big piece. And the second piece, I think, is just goes back to accountability too. Is what are we doing to call in ourselves and call as Black men? What are we doing to call in ourselves, and how are we calling our brothers in to be better as we think about this? What a lot of the attention around the deaths of I saw a tweet, and it was a lot of the attention around the deaths of Black women is focused on the police shootings with Breonna Taylor, and that's 100% fact that we should be thinking about it. But if police violence ended today, if racial capitalism ended today, Black women still wouldn't be safe, because most intimate partner deaths happen at the hands of most deaths of Black women happen at the hands of their partners. So we have to be thinking about how are we bucking the system and doing better and treating better and treating folks better, because I think that's where we often lose esteem. And those are and I think part of the missing link in this conversation is those are hard ass conversations. Those are hard ass conversations that tell your brother yo, it's wrong of you to dog out a Black woman, or the Black men who on I think it was on Instagram or Twitter, who were at a rally and, threw a black woman in a dumpster, while they're wearing black shirts. It's hard to call out folks, when they're doing wrong, but like it is the morally right obligation that we have as black men in this fight to do so. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And I think that, like, for those of us who believe in freedom, we can't leave black women out of the equation. We can't leave black trans women out of the equation. We got to fight for all of the folks that fall under this category of being black. And I know it's hard, and it's a place where I'm still trying to learn. I'm also still trying to be held accountable by my community, so that way I can be a better brother and be a better person in this fight for black women. So I think that's like the only pieces I would add to what Deborah said.
I wanted to talk about the story of a young woman who has been trending on Twitter over the past several days. Her name is, I hope I'm saying this correctly, Oluwatine Salu. She was a 19-year-old activist from Tallahassee, Florida. She had very much been on the front lines of a lot of the recent protests. And actually, we can hear her in her own words. There was a viral video of her speaking extremely passionately at a recent rally. She was found murdered recently, along with another person. And there's been so much discussion about what happened to her, even as police have made an arrest in her case. But first, let's hear from Oluwatine in her own words.
Nah, can't nobody silence me. I just want, it's not that all lives don't matter, but right now, our lives matter. Black lives matter.
Yes.
Black trans lives matter.
Yes.
Trans lives matter.
Yes.
Because guess what? We all minorities, but right now, like, let's focus on the person who got killed. Tony McDade was a black trans man. Okay?
Amen.
We're not doing this. We doing this for him. We doing this for our brothers and our sisters who got shot, but we doing this for every black person. Because at the end of the day, I cannot take my fucking skin color off. I cannot mask this shit, okay? Everywhere I fucking go, I'm profiled whether I like it or not.
That ain't right.
Like, I'm looked at whether I like it or not.
That ain't right.
First of all, I want white people to realize their fucking privilege.
Yes, ma'am.
No one can look at you and tell anything about you unless you give them that information. Wherever the fuck I go, I'm profiled. Look at my fucking hair, look at my skin, bruh.
We love it.
This shit, I can't take this shit off. So guess what? I'ma die about it.
Yes.
I'ma die about my fucking skin. You cannot take my fucking blackness away from me. My blackness is not for your fucking consumption, nigga. It's not. It's not. Okay? It's not. And y'all need to listen. It's like I said, it's okay to be angry. Use wisdom. Don't move stupidly and get yourself hurt. You already seen, we all in this together. I didn't mean to like divide anybody. We all in this together. My brother who got, he got ran over. Y'all need to know who the fucking enemy is. Sometimes I get mad, but I'm not trying to divide nobody. Y'all need to remember who fucking enemy is. It's racist Tallahassee. White racist Tallahassee.
Say it again.
Because those are the niggas that ran our fucking brother over. So y'all need to keep that in mind. The same energy that we had when we were walking the fucking streets, keep that with you at all fucking times. Don't let nobody take away your blackness from you. Your blackness is not supposed to be subdued at all. It's not.
We want to send rest in peace condolences to all of those who knew and loved Oluwatoyin. She had been missing for 9 days, and police found her body along with that of another woman, Vicky Sims. Aaron Glee Jr. has been arrested in this case, although no motive has been given. But, I wanted to speak to you both about how perilous it is in general to speak publicly and forcefully and with zeal and passion about Black liberation. It has never been safe for Black organizers ever, right? I mean, think about folks that was trying to organize people out of slavery. I mean, that's a silly thing to say, organize people out of slavery, but organize people to run away, to escape. I mean, it's dangerous work. If you got caught, you would die. I'm thinking of Fred Hampton Jr., who was assassinated by police in his own apartment in Chicago, laying next to his pregnant girlfriend. I mean, all the activists in Ferguson who have gone missing and / murdered, lift up the name of Darren Seals, amongst others. How is it to work in this space, knowing, number one, how important and critical this work is, that 154 years on from Juneteenth, from emancipation, that struggle for Black freedom is still one that is very much in progress, but at the same time, there are those who will kill to make sure it is impeded in some way. Branden, let me start with you about the perils about advocating for your people, even in the year 2020, even as all corporations are coming out and saying how important Black lives are at this moment, but it's still not safe.
I think the thing that I think about in that moment is like you said, freedom ain't never been a thing that's been handed to us in this world. I think the one piece that we think about is like when you talk about the freedom rise, and when folks were going down to to the South to help register voters, people were being killed even then. So it's in the back of our minds, that this is a thing that could take your life. The activist community and the environmental justice activist community in Detroit, think about, and use Charity Hicks as a case, to this moment. Or she was killed, on her way to a UN conference. I think it was 2014 or 2015, where she was talking about, the water shutoffs. And so, I think that it's scary, and it's also another reason why we have to be thinking about solidarity versus, the sort of celebrity activist culture that a lot of folks tend to breed. Like, organizing ain't never been cool. Organizing ain't never been safe. We just make it look good. And like, we have to be thinking about, like, in this moment, like, this is not a thing that we get into because you're going to get paid. It's not a thing that you're going to get into because you're going to get a lot of accolades. It's a thing that you get into because you have love for people and you have love for humanity. And, you want to build the type of solidarity with your brothers, your sisters, your siblings, around the world. And so, and doubling down on the fact that we need community to keep us safe. It's not going to be a thing where we're isolated and by ourselves, where you're going to, where you can be susceptible to the type of danger that white supremacists and others, may provoke. So, for me, it's nerve wracking and it's frightening because I think, it's a real clear and present danger. And it's something that, Detroiters have experienced and know all too well, again, with Charity Hicks.
Deborah, what's your take about how important yet dangerous it is to organize on behalf of Black freedom and Black liberation? You're muted, sweetheart.
Sorry. I said, I had a lot of background noise, but I said that I agree a lot with what Branden said, and just know that most activists do not get into this space for accolades and for praise. We get into this space because freedom is all we can think about. And we can't rest. We can't rest without it. And it is scary. Like, I have so many of my dearest that are in these spaces that are right there in the front that have been targeted, that have had bombs sent to their homes, that are being targeted in their cities because they are speaking out. My family texts me all the time, like, where are you? Are you safe? Where are you? Are you safe? They never thought I would pick up my feet and my hands and do what I can to make sure that my people cross the finish line to liberation. Like, this is not for the faint of heart. But if I got to go down in order to make sure my people are free, and that is scary to say. I don't want to leave this place. But if the work I do and speak the truth and my voice gives somebody else the courage to move forward, passes another policy to protect my people, brings joy to my folks and true liberation, then so be it. That was my purpose here. That is what God needed me here for. And it is so scary. And like Branden said, that is why we have to hold on to each other. We all we got. And that's real. We all we got. We all we ever had. And so it's like, and this isn't everybody's lane. It's not. But there is a space for you to wrap your arms around your brother, your sister, your neighbor, someone you don't know, because we have to protect each other. We have to remember one another, the sacrifices. We have to remember the joys, because as we know, they have wanted to use us, destroy us, abuse us, erase us since they drug us here. We all we got. And we not going to give up. We done shown that over the centuries that we going to go down swinging and something going to move. And so I feel like in this stage that we're at in our nation's history and even globally, to know that so many people are literally on the front lines, knowing what could happen to them, knowing who might be following them home, knowing who's tracking them. But the freedom and liberation of their people is more important than that. That's an isolating place to be. And so that's why it's important for us to hold each other and hold each other dear, especially in this time, because I believe in this time, in this lifetime, we can see true liberation. We can. And sacrifices will come with it. But I believe that we will.
I really want to thank you both for taking the time to join us here today on Stir Crazy for Juneteenth. But before I let you both go, if you could share with our viewers some information about your respective organizations, how people can reach out and how people can help. Deborah, let's start. Let's stay with you in the Chi. I love Chicago. What's going on with Action Now Chicago?
You can find us, at we're a little Twitter handle there, but actionnowchi.org. That's our website. Action Now One on Facebook. That's where we do a lot of our just engagement online. But Action Now has been around for a long time, and so under new leadership now. That's me. I'm a little radical, but it's about liberating my people. So check us out if you in the city. Pull up if you see us out there. We're in coalition with other Black folks here in Chicago, and we just trying to make sure that Black Chicago remains. Black Cook County remains. So that's how you can find us. And I appreciate any support, whether it's volunteer, whether it's donation, uplifting the work. Yeah, showing love. I appreciate it all.
Branden, talk to us about Detroit Action.
Yeah, so Detroit Action is in my mind, the premier Black and brown political home for working class Detroiters in the state of Michigan. And why I say that is that we're trying to build the radical left in a place where folks, whether if you're if you're working a 9 to 5, or if you're a person who's a dope boy, but and you care about your community, that you can find a place to call home and exercise your political voice. So we do that through a number of different things. Due to COVID, we've been doing it all digitally. And if you're interested in getting down with us, whether it's on housing, jobs, criminal justice, public education, or holding these elected officials accountable, you can find us online on all of the social medias, Twitter and Instagram at Detroit_Action, or on Facebook, which is weird. You can hit us on Detroit Action Organizing. My Twitter handle is underneath my picture. Don't follow me. I'm not talking about nothing except dogs, the NBA, and rap music. But if you're interested in those things, you can follow me.
That's what's happening. Well, listen, I want to thank you all both. I know this was a heavy conversation on a day of celebration, but we will still celebrate because we're all still here. And for those who are not here, we will continue to advocate and fight for justice on their behalf and lift up their names. And we are so grateful to all the ancestors who have shed so much blood, suffered so much horror and indignities, but clearly we got to be amongst some of the strongest people on the planet because we have survived all of that and are still here in 2020, still fighting. So I'd like to thank Branden Snyder from Detroit Action, Deborah Harris from Action Now Chicago. Thank you guys both. It was enlightening having you both on with us today. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Blessings to you. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Peace.
All right, folks. I'm going to say have a good weekend. Like I said, every day, don't forget, the Rona is still out here. COVID-19 is still very much jumping on people. I don't care how open your state says it is. Please wear a mask. Please continue to wash your hands. Social distance. The Rona is still jumping on people out here in a very big way. So please do not let your guard down just because the weather is nice, okay? I'm Kim Brown. Thanks again for watching Stir Crazy and the Real News Network. We will see you on Monday. Anything you want to say, hit us up, stircrazy@therealnews.com. Y'all be easy.